Welcome to the Courage to Be podcast with Tanya Vasallo. Before we get into this episode, I want to share with you that I'm on a mission to close the gender gap in the podcasting world so that more and more women's voices are heard. If you feel that this is something you value too, then please rate, review, and share the podcast. And in exchange, and as my way to say thank you to you, I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. All you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course. Welcome back to The Courage to Be, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And today we have Mel Findlater. How are you, Mel?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you here and to share with our audience. Share a little bit about your story, your background. What is it that you do? Where are you from?
Sure. Yeah. It's always hard to know where to start with this, right? So I'm going to purposely start with the labels and then go beyond it. So the labels are that I'm a mom of a 6 and 9-year-old. I'm a wife. I'm on Vancouver Island. I am a coach, often nature-based coach, business owner of Permission to Be Human. And I am a woman who has big, audacious dreams and always has. I feel like I'd never really fit in with the crowd growing up because I was just wanting to do things differently. I'm not a rule follower necessarily if the rule doesn't make sense to me. And yeah, so I spend most of my days looking after kids / walking a dog / getting in the lake / working on my business and podcast, Permission to Be Human. So yeah, that's where I spend a lot of my time.
So you just threw in there the podcast. Let's talk about that a little bit, Permission to Be Human. Yeah. And you just mentioned off camera that it's about to turn a year old, and that's super exciting. How did that journey start for you? We can start reverse engineering because I know some other things about your life too that we could go into moments of courage. You know, this is what it's all about. It's us tapping into our courage and growing our confidence. So how did you start your podcast and what got you excited to do it? Because look, it takes courage to start a podcast, and you're almost at the year mark, which 80% of podcasts will not make it to a year. That's a huge statistic. That's why anyone that wants to start a podcast, I always go through like an interview and questionnaire with them because we offer these services. And if they, I have to see their big why, because if not, they will give up before that year mark. So tell us about your story in starting the podcast and what that looked like.
Yeah, sure. And I think my answer is going to start that same way, that it is one of my acts of courage, like the hugest one almost in some ways, right? In that I tried to start one 4 years ago, and maybe, around that, right at the beginning, like January 2020. And we all know what happened that year, right? Like it's one of those dates, those years that we all know what happened. And I lived in England at the time, and I was running a community called Ordinary Super Parents, where we focused in on how once you become a mom or a parent, you can also still have that adventurous, spontaneous side, and you can do everyday adventures both with and without your kids. So I was going to start a podcast at that time. I did. I even recorded like 3 interviews, and I had it all ready to get up and go, to really inspire people that they can go out and do these things as a parent as well. And then March 2020 hit. COVID just threw us all a spinner. I moved to Canada in March 2020 from England, which was nuts, a whole nother story. And it
was that before the pandemic or because of the pandemic?
We already knew we were going to move, but we moved a month early because of the pandemic. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. We had planned on moving home. Luckily, that decision had already been made. And we were really lucky that we made it back in the way that we did, because we didn't even get COVID, and we were able to sell our house, and like all these things that could have gone wrong didn't. So we were really, really lucky, as crazy as that time was and as hard as that time was. So I had this podcast idea at the time, and I was like, I'm going to start it. I'm going to put it out there. And then I was like, this is not appropriate to tell, at that point, my mostly British audience, who their restrictions were like very intense for the first stage of COVID, that they could go out on adventures. Well, they weren't even allowed to go for a walk if they had to drive to where they went. They could only go from your front door, right? So I stopped at that point in time. And then well, just over a year ago now, I got to this point where I was like, no, now I'm doing this work with moms on their big audacious dreams. I'm doing this coaching. I went and did a course in between now and then on applied positive psychology and learned all these amazing tools. And I was like, this needs to get out in the world. So now the podcast is more related to helping moms find their big audacious dreams and have the courage to get out there and go and do them. And I love it. It's a funny way to like, I needed to get out there and talk to people, right? I needed to get the word out there, inspire moms. And there was also this like selfish point of like, I need momentum. I need something I have to do every single week. I need to talk to these amazing people that are like on my list that I've met in these years of COVID, because so much of it is virtual. And it just allows me to connect with people I wouldn't have otherwise, yourself included, right? Like, why would we have otherwise talked? We probably wouldn't have. And I feel more fulfilled because we all know that like connection is a huge part of humanity and we feel better about ourselves when we have that. So I get that. But as well as, I have people saying, oh, I listen to your podcast every single week. I really love this one. The permission to be overwhelmed is a really big one, a popular one that people seem to like. And as well as the inspiring interviews, it's about giving people the tools to get out of survival so that they can get into their thriving and actually start to see possibility again. So I'm really excited by the whole podcast and the 1 year anniversary coming up. I'm putting an episode out every single day that week, which sounds intense, and it is going to be intense, but I'm prepping it all in advance. And then I'm doing a Facebook and Instagram live each day as well with an actual tool that people can use in those times where we just feel like life is too much, in those times of overwhelm. So I'm super excited about that. Yeah.
That is awesome. Tell me a little bit about the difference between the launch of that podcast 4 years ago versus now. Like, who are you? Like, how are you different? And
Mm,
how does this podcast look different now? Because it takes courage to be like,
yeah.
anyone else could be like, oh no, I failed with the podcast. I didn't make it to the year long or whatever
Yeah.
stories you can tell yourself. And you still decided to, you got knocked down like many of us did with the pandemic. Pandemic
Yeah.
was good at knocking everyone down. But
Yeah.
what's different this time? Because that takes courage in itself, Mel, to say, no, I'm doing it again.
Yeah. And what's different is me, honestly. Like the pandemic, that first, moving during a pandemic to a place where very few people. We had a little bit of family, but otherwise being told you can't make friends, essentially, was the hardest, darkest time of my life. And I am totally different than I was then and before then. Right. Because I've had to go through that. I've had to pick myself up and say, okay, I can't see purpose. I can't see dreams, which is not me. That's not my normal self. Say, okay, how am I going to get that back again? I like learning. I did this course on applied positive psychology where I showed up every week for 2 hours virtually with the same small group of people and learned about ourselves and the world and the science of flourishing. And I totally changed through that. And I'm a much more confident person because I've been able to let some of that grief and those kind of darker feelings actually go through. Like we all push them down and hold them in there, right? But I couldn't like, that's not going to help. That's not going to help. I would have just stayed in that space and they would have leaked out in some sort of way. But instead, I was able, like, I took up my love of learning, which I love, my love of community, connecting with people, my real need for that at that point in time, and finally started to feel like myself again. And then that was, 3 years ago now. And the journey just continued to grow since then. So you're right, like the podcast that I originally was going to start, I don't know if I would have lasted a year. I didn't know exactly what my why was. I wasn't clear on what my business was going to be or my, any of that. And now I'm like, I am absolutely committed to helping mothers change the world, essentially. And it has been a journey to get to that point. And I think that's really important to point out those hard times within, not only emotionally, like I already mentioned, but, like everybody's like, oh, you need to niche. And I'm like, I don't want to niche because I have a very strong value of inclusiveness, right? And I went through it took me 2 years to figure out who I wanted to work with, right? And and eventually got to the point where it took a good coach to coach me through and have me cry and realize that I want to do mothers, but I'm scared. I'm scared to do mothers because of the assumptions people might make around me saying you should live a big audacious dream. There's this cultural story around the fact that people might assume that I'm saying being mom isn't enough. And that's not what I'm saying. Being mom is amazing, and you're changing the world every single day through those little actions that we do and those big actions we do with our family. And it's okay to want more. And it took me so long to get to that point. And once I was at that point, I was like, yeah, podcast, we got to share it. I'm okay with someone coming back and saying, what are you talking about? Because now I know what I'm talking about. I know my beliefs. Yeah.
That is awesome. What have been some of your dreams that
Mm.
you might, podcasting has been one of them, and even if it took you a little bit longer, you were going to do it in 2020, but you ended up doing it last year. What
Yeah.
have been some of your dreams that you followed and you had to be patient? Because I think that's another big thing for all of us. We want everything. We want it now. It's like
Yeah.
there's a gestation process with it. But what are some of your dreams that you can share with us that you've
Yeah.
accomplished or that you set out, as a goal?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, especially when you add accomplished at the end of it, right? Because what does that mean? And that's where all my little judgment guys in my head are like, oh, did you really accomplish it? But the fact is that all of the big dreams that I've had along the way have led me to where I am right now, right? So I wanted to travel the world in university. So year after we moved to the UK, and we were going for 1 to 2 years. I went with my now husband, then boyfriend. And that was the big dream, to just go and experience other cultures and understand how other people work. That's my curiosity I've always had in life, is how do other people work? And they think differently than me, like why and how? And I've always been this. A friend of mine, Lou Shackleton, used to always call me the why bird, because I'm a why. I ask why about everything. I don't necessarily say why all the time, but through other questions I do, because I'm just so curious about how people work. And over time, that turned into, so we moved there. I started my first real quote unquote job. I worked at a charity for disability advocacy, and I enabled people with learning difficulties to learn life skills. And I managed that team. And that was I didn't know that dream before. I didn't know. It was a surprise one, you know? And then, that's an important first start of the part of the story, because the dreaming came when the difficulty came. So that job started not working so well because the business, or the charity that I was working for, grew very large very quickly. And a lot of my friends were made redundant. I was very fortunate not to be, but I was like, I need something. I want to change the world. And I don't think I'm doing that right now. We started the Change the World Gang. That's my first dream that I can think of, the Change the World Gang, and started a business, a not-for-profit business in the UK, and started to just really explore what that meant. How do we get people from, we used to say, impossible to I'm possible. I started to learn what coaching was and practice it, but without calling myself a coach, because I wasn't fully qualified and I didn't have the confidence yet. So that's one of the dreams, is to do that. I knew as soon as I took a coaching course that that's what I wanted to do, but it took me another 7 years to actually go and get a full qualification and feel confident in that work. Other dreams, right now, the big dream is to help mothers change the world. Mothering is what will change the world, whether you're a mom or you're just mothering. That could be either of those things, right? Mothering is a verb. And I truly think that the world needs more of it. And if we can embrace that and enable people in that position who do mother to know who they are enough to have the confidence and, as you say, courage to take a step towards it, then the world will change one little step at a time. And the dream for me is the ripple effect of that, right? And I won't even see a lot of it, and that's okay. Right?
I love this. And we're going to go deeper. Let's take a quick pause and
Sure.
dive deeper into this
Yeah.
mothering. I want to share an amazing opportunity, my signature event, Increase Your Income and Impact. It's happening May 31st through June 1st, a Thursday through Saturday, in person in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And this event will be infusing it with a ton of the success principles from Napoleon Hill. You will walk away after these 3 days shifting your mindset from not enough money to manifesting on the spot. You'll also learn how to get over your fear of visibility in sales so that you can have a greater impact in the world. These in-person events are life transforming, and you can now get your early bird ticket with the code LUCKY24 and save $400 for a limited time. I look forward to seeing you there. Just listen to what some of the participants have to say about it.
One of the biggest aha moments that I got was to tap into my creative self. Sometimes we think because we don't have a degree or we don't have certain skills that we're just not good enough. And there are so many things that we can draw upon ourselves and transferable skills that we can use, not necessarily a degree, that really help us push to the next level. Another thing that I learned a lot is my relationship with money and about passive income, about investing in stocks that have dividends. One of the things I loved about the event, there were a lot of learning opportunities, like I just mentioned, but not only that, you got to collaborate and connect with so many women from so many different experiences, so many different levels, and I got nuggets from each one of them. It's a wonderful event. You should not miss it because it is life-changing.
We're back here, and talk to me more about mothering being a verb and how we are all mothering. We're close to Mother's Day, so it's a good way to celebrate the moms in our lives, and even the moms that don't have kids specifically, but are still mothering. Let's
Yeah.
dive deeper into that, Mel. Talk to me.
Yeah, for sure. So, it just kind of hit me maybe a couple years ago that mothering is a verb. And here's where I came. So I went to England to visit again. That was first time after the pandemic, and see my friends. And one of my friends and I ended up going to the World Happiness Conference, and it was in Italy. And I was there mostly because I wanted to see her, and I thought the topics were interesting, right? But I was watching her surrounded by these amazing people. And one morning I woke up and I could see her kind of just in this space of a bit of anxiety, a bit of edginess of like, oh, what am I going to do? And I
But
said to
wait
her,
1 second, Mel,
yeah,
who was this? I
this
missed
is a
it.
good friend of mine, Sarah, who I went to this conference with. She's
Okay,
from
gotcha.
Vancouver Island, but I know her from England. So we
Gotcha.
went over
Okay.
to this conference in Italy. And this was her space, really, right? These were her people. And I really wanted to just kind of watch her and support her in any way I could. And one morning we woke up and I just looked at her. I was like, I have the inclination to mother you right now. And she's like, oh, like that would be really nice. Right. Because she's like an amazing mother to everybody, her kids included. And I was like, so like, what does that need? Like, can I make you some breakfast? She's like, yes. I'm like, okay, gonna make her some breakfast, bring it over here. And then the conversation and the thought process just led on from there, that's what I love to do, is mother. So, moving on from myself, I was like, well, that's what's needed in the world, is this concept where we look at others, we think about them, and we offer them what they need, right? And we inquire with them what they need, and we help people essentially, right? In this very like caring and loving way. Like, I truly see you and I want to give you what you need right now. Like, it takes stepping back and watching and observing, not just giving random things, right? Mothering isn't what all of us end up doing sometimes with our kids, which is like telling them what to do. That's not mothering. Mothering is the like nurturing and the loving and observing and the really seeing people for who they are. And I think if more and more people can do this, like we have people out there doing this. And if we can notice and acknowledge how amazing that is, then it'll be boosted in its need. Right? We'll start to all see why it's so important, and we'll start to do it more often outside of our own homes as well. Because that's our temptation, you know? There's so many people in the world that's like our go-to, and we feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that because it's overstepping a line. Just ask for permission, right?
I think that's beautiful. And I love that you were so perceptive with your friend, because we
Mm,
tend to think, like we're saying, mothering is mothering a child, but there's this nurturing and this mothering that comes out innate in women. I think we're just wired that way, that
yeah,
we want to nurture, whether it's an animal, it's your pet, whether it's another human
yeah,
being, whether it's your kid, it doesn't matter. The point's not really about having to mother a kid. That's always great too,
yeah,
because kids do need that. But I love how you were perceptive and aware with your friend, with Sarah, and you just asked her, can I mother you right now? Because that would have caught me so off guard. And I think
Yeah.
it's hard for the majority of women to be
Yeah.
receptive and to receive that love. I almost want to tear up with it. Like if someone were to offer that to me right now, because I feel like we tend to be the pillars, we're
Yeah.
holding everything together. We're mothering the husbands, we're mothering the kids, we're mothering the pets, we're literally taking care of everyone and holding it all together. That if
Yeah.
someone comes to you and they're like, could I give you a massage right now? Or could I prepare breakfast for you? I'd be kind of like, wait, what? Like, what do you want out of me? Like, I almost be suspicious, like there's
Yeah.
something you're needing from me. So I love that, Mel. And I think this should be a practice that we use more often. I love that
Yeah.
story. Thank you so much for sharing about that.
And it depends who it is, right? I think you need to know, like Sarah and I have a very close relationship. So
Yeah.
she's very receptive in that moment. And I think, but there are others, like you could go simpler. On Mother's Day last year, my next door neighbor, I got the kids to make something for them. We wrote a card and I said, thanks for mothering my kids, because that's what she does, right?
That's
And
awesome.
and we can do it with each other. Start with someone who's close to you, start with your partner, start with your closest friend, you know? And it can build your courage to be okay with the fact that someone will be shocked if, you ask them, because that's okay, because it's just not the norm in the world. But the only way to make it that way is to just start doing.
We should do that more, like for Mother's Day. That should be the thing, is just go up to any other woman and just say, can I mother
Yeah.
you right now? I love it. I love it.
Yeah, like,
There's
what do you
one,
need is what you're saying, right? Like,
yes,
what do you
yes.
need?
Like, could I
Yeah.
prepare you breakfast? Could I give you a foot rub? Like whatever it
Yeah.
is that comes to mind to you. I mean, that's just beautiful. And I have a friend of mine, my friend Lori. She's just like an incredible mom. And that's how I see her. She's always mothering so many people. And you can just pinpoint certain human beings
Yeah.
that are better at that or more advanced, let's say, at this particular thing. But let's talk about the flip side of mothering. You mentioned before overwhelm, and I do feel like we carry a lot as women and as moms, and wanting to be the superwoman that are doing everything and then aren't allowing ourselves to have time for ourselves. We feel guilty. We feel like, no, there's no time for me. Everything should be for the kids. Everything should be for the husband, for the family, and we don't invest in ourselves. We don't, like maybe there's a class that you want to take and you don't
Yeah.
take it because I'd rather put that money towards my kids' education, or I don't give myself a massage, even though my body's like falling apart and I really need a massage right now. How do you tackle overwhelm with your clients, or how do you deal with overwhelm as a mom? And
Yeah.
how do you handle it with your clients, or how do you guide them with that?
So my initial answer is a question back to everyone, right? What if mothering is a verb to you too? Like, we need to mother ourselves. If you were stepping out of your body and looking at yourself, be like, what do you need right now? That's mothering. Like, observe yourself for a moment, take that reflective stance and notice what you really need. Which, yeah, it might be a foot massage, or it might be breakfast that you never got, or whatever, but it might also be, I need to breathe. Right? I need to slow down. I need someone else to care for me too. So we can mother ourselves, but we can also ask for help. It is not bad to ask for help. It is not shameful to ask for help. In fact, I would argue that it is a privilege for the other person to be asked, right? If we go back to me wanting to mother people, if someone asks me for help, I'm like, yeah, like, right? As long as it's within my capacity at that moment. And asking for help is I could go on for an hour about asking for help, right? But I think the key point of that is mothering can be flipped. Mothering is mothering yourself as well. And if you don't mother yourself, you're going to break, right? And that's where overwhelm comes from, is that we've forgotten ourselves somewhere in this mix of life, right? Because we care, because we nurture so much others, we put them ahead of ourselves, but we can't actually nurture other people as well as we could unless we've nurtured ourselves. So going to your overwhelm question, there's plenty of tools and various things. There's kind of the things you can do in the moment of like, I got to get out of this. I need to get out of fight, flight, all of those things. I need to get into a space where I'm centered again. And then there's things you can do longer term. There's things you can work on after. So I don't know which one of those you want to go into because they're very different tools, right? We can't in the moment of overwhelm be like analyzing our thoughts about what do I actually need, and like, because our brain isn't working. Our brain is not working if we are in overwhelm.
So what should we do then? The
Yeah.
moment we're in that overwhelm, if the brain's not working, we're just like in that fight or flight. What are some suggestions of stuff that you do?
Yeah, do you know the simplest one that works so well for me and will work if you can do it for yourself is a form of grounding. Like, you need to get out of your head and into your body. You need to convince your body that it is safe because it doesn't think it is, right? Fight or flight is about literally, like, our brains and bodies have been, evolutionized to think that a tiger is chasing us. But we know in our brain it's not. But we need to convince our body that that is the case. We need to convince the other part of our brain that, like, no, we're safe now. So grounding would be as simple as like, put your feet on the ground and notice where they are. Focus your attention on the feet and, like, wiggle your toes a little bit and focus on that. And if you do that, even just for a minute or two, if it's working, your breath will slow down a little bit. Your heart rate will slow down a little bit. So I did this, just an example. I was like entering the state of overwhelm. So the earlier you can do it in noticing, once you start to notice how your body feels before you're all the way gone, the earlier the better, right? Because it's easier to intervene without, the repercussions that come with being in the full state. But, I was at a doctor's office, which I get overwhelmed very easily by doctor's office. I find them quite intimidating. And I was there for my son, and it was a walk-in. So I had to go up and, they called my number and say, the issue we were there for. And it was one that was, really touching on my, like, limiting beliefs about my mothering, or, whatever, like, is it my fault that, like, whatever. And I got all teared up and I was like, shit, pardon me. I don't know if you're allowed to swear on here, but I was like, oh no, like, I need my thinking brain to work right now, because I have to go in and talk to a doctor about this very specific thing. And I need to be able to think properly, not only react emotionally. So I went and sat down while we waited for the doctor, and I put my feet on the ground, and I closed my eyes for a moment, and I focused on my toes, each individual one. My foot, is my heel on the ground? And then just slowly moved up, and that started to calm me. So that's one of them. Another favorite of mine is havening. I don't know, a lot of people haven't heard of havening.
I've heard of grounding, and we do that. And if you can find grass, which we don't have it
Yes.
here in New Mexico, but
Any ground is fine. Get out in nature if you can.
yeah.
But, like, in that moment, sometimes you can't do that, right? You're usually overwhelmed because a gazillion things are happening around you, right? But there are others. So havening is a practice that I love and would love to dig into further in my own experience. But self-havening, which we'll just start with that, there are actual practitioners that can haven with you. But self-havening in these moments is similar to tapping. Okay. And the practitioners would say it kind of goes deeper if you're working with a practitioner around trauma and stuff. But in these moments of overwhelm, we're basically telling our body it's safe by doing some movements. So my favorite is rubbing my hands together as if I'm washing them, right? And I can do that on a screen and you can't even tell I'm doing it, right? So if I start to feel my heart racing, notice the body, like I'm sweating a bit, my face is turning red, what's happening? I can rub my hands together. And because I've done that in moments of joy as well, my body feels safe. So it's about the kind of pre-work as well. There's also just rubbing under your eyes and down your cheeks. That's another one. Depends how much you want to do that in public. Everybody's a little different. The hands weren't working for me once. The first flight I took post-COVID, it's not even post-COVID, but post-intense COVID. And I was like, I got to rub my face, and it just looks like I'm kind of like tired or something, right? And that just calmed me enough to get on with the flight, right? Yeah.
That is wonderful. And then, so you would suggest practicing like the rubbing of the hands, like pretending that you're washing your hands at a moment of joy, so that you're wiring your brain to associate when you're, in a moment. That is great. I love that one. I had one where that I learned from one of my energy teachers that I can't remember her name right now. It's a couple where you
Mm.
put your hands on your forehead. I know most of the people are listening, so you're not watching this right now, but basically you're putting your fingertips on your forehead and you're kind of pull in the middle of your forehead. So
Yeah.
above your third eye, all your fingertips are touching from one hand and the other, and you're just pulling to the side. And you can do this
Yeah.
all the way up through your scalp. And another one too, for the listeners, if you want to practice any of these, is just like if your mind is racing a lot, just
Yeah.
obviously you might not want to do this in public. This one's for more of a private moment, but you might want to do it in public. It doesn't really matter. To me, it wouldn't matter. Just leaving your hand on your forehead for like
Yeah.
2 minutes, and you will
Yeah.
start feeling the heat that's emanating from your brain, from your head.
Mm.
It is
Yeah.
crazy to try that one. But
Yeah.
wow, those are great, Mel. Thank you for sharing about those. I want to go deeper into mothering since we've gotten into this particular topic. I know that in our bonus episode, you're going to be talking about resilience and seeing possibility, but we've gotten on this topic of mothering, which I love. And you became a mother quite young. Tell us about that story.
Did I? Let me think about that. No, I was well, it depends on your definition of young. So I was what,
Okay.
31, I think.
Okay,
Um,
I thought that you had become a mom younger than that, like as a teenager. So
no,
my
no, not
apologies
me.
for that
No.
one.
So my journey to motherhood was one more of, it was not my big dream,
Okay,
weirdly
tell
enough.
us about that.
No, because like it wasn't not my dream. It just wasn't my dream, right? It was just kind of like in there, almost as a like normal expectation that that'll probably happen in life because that's what we do. And then it got to the point where my husband and I were like, yeah, I think like this seems like the right time. And we couldn't get pregnant. And 3 years of that. And we had IVF and a miscarriage round and finally a little frozen embryo baby whose name means snow now. We ended up naming her Ira. And so that was my journey starting into motherhood, like getting in there. But you know what? When you're focused so much on getting pregnant, all of a sudden you get pregnant and you're like, now I have, like, what does this mean? Like,
Like
I
now
almost
what?
didn't even think about being a mom. I just thought about getting pregnant, like, because that's what I had to think about all the time. There's so much stuff you have to do, right? And then I was like not sure how to think about it and what was mom life going to be like. And I'm a super spontaneous person. I want to be able to run off and travel or build this project or business or do all these things. And I had all these stories from society being like, yeah, you can't really do that. It all changes when you become a mom. And it took a little bit. And then I was like, no, I don't believe that. So I started like researching other people that were doing really cool stuff. And that's where the adventuring and parenting came in. And that project came into my life earlier on, was around that because I was like, I'm not okay with that. So I'm going to build the community of people that I need around me. And that's where I literally built a community for other people that I needed the most. And that's what I'm doing now. Different stage of life, right?
I love it. And thank you. I appreciate your honesty too of not being able to like wanting to get pregnant, and be a mom, because we went through that journey too. And I think this is not talked enough about it, like
Yeah.
just there is another episode. I'll go back to it and remind you what number it was. I believe it was Kelly O'Keefe, Balancing Career and Personal Life as a Woman. And it's episode 26 for anyone that's going through this journey where she wanted to become a mom too. And so I think it's very important to shine light on these things, Mel. So I applaud you for your vulnerability and sharing with us and your honesty, because many people have to go down that route. It's
Yeah.
the same thing as like miscarriages. Like a lot of people keep that as a taboo subject. And if you've gone through a miscarriage, you start finding out other people that have gone through miscarriages. Like that happened to me in my journey. I'm not going to get into that right now, but that's something that happened after. Then you're starting to share with other people. Oh, I did too. And in your case, like I went through IVF and I wanted to become a mom. So I think it's really important that we talk about these subjects and
Agreed.
we
Yeah.
shine light on them, and like you're saying, suddenly you get hit and you're like, oh, wow, what does that mean now, that I've
Yeah.
become a mom, and what does that look like? Were your dreams, once your first kid was born, was it everything you expected? Did things
Yeah.
change? Like, what type of courage did you have to tap into at that point? Because the different types of
Yeah.
courage here.
Yeah, definitely. And there's different answers depending on the stage of that initial journey. But you know, the first bit of it is that I had gestational diabetes. So they end up in the UK, they want to induce you early. They want to, well, 37 weeks. So I went in and got induced and had a horrific birth. And I did not get that moment of like, oh my God, I love you so much as soon as I saw my baby. I was just in pure body shock, right? And then I had a lot of guilt and shame about that for a little while, right? And then, the first 6 weeks, my baby was sick as well during that time. And it was the hardest thing ever. And I remember this doctor, he was amazing, said to me, the first 6 weeks are the hardest. It is a tunnel, so there's an exit. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. Right? And it's true. And there is an exit. And after that point, once I started to get into the flow of it and my body had recovered from this trauma, essentially, I was able to slowly become myself again and figure out who this new version of me was that was mom as well as this person with big audacious dreams before that. And the first 3 years of my life with just one kid, I brought her. When she was 3 months, we went to a conference in Berlin. She was just attached to my stomach in a little sling, like little tiny thing, sleeping most of the time. But my very supportive husband would like take her out for a walk sometimes so that I could be alone. And we kind of did a bit of both. And, I did a lot of that kind of stuff for that first while. And I felt like I was meant to be a mom for that first kid. And I brought her to meetings and I still did my little business stuff that I wanted to do on the side. I shouldn't say little, that's like implying it's not big business stuff on the side, right? And then I had a second kid, not IVF, surprise kid. And totally different kid. I would not be able to just bring him to a conference, plug him on the floor with some toys and let him play. No, he's an externalizer. He's an active, I didn't think we'd have typical boy-girl situation, but that is what we have. And he, changed the way I had to parent. And that has been a challenge since, to be honest. And once you have two, it becomes this, I think I thought I was meant to be a mom because I got to use the mothering, like the nurturing for those first 3 years. And then after that, with the second, I couldn't meet all three of our needs. And if you add my husband in there, 4, right? It was impossible. And it still is. You cannot meet that many people's needs at the same time. And that was that's still to this day my trigger when I work on very hard. But it really, really, that's when the hardness came. When I'm like, okay, sitting there on my big blue chair, nursing my littlest, and a 3-year-old's climbing on my head because she just wants my attention because she's used to having it. Right? Used to me meeting all of her needs. And I was like, I can't, no, go away. Right? Your brother's going to wake up and all these things. And, that is the start of what became now the lifelong journey of realizing that it's okay. I can't meet everybody's needs and figuring out what to do with that trigger. And because trigger will send you into overwhelm, what we just talked about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to take another quick pause. I want to share an amazing opportunity, my signature event, Increase Your Income and Impact. It's happening May 31st through June 1st, of Thursday through Saturday, in person in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And this event will be infusing it with a ton of the success principles from Napoleon Hill. You will walk away after these 3 days shifting your mindset from not enough money to manifesting on the spot. You'll also learn how to get over your fear of visibility in sales so that you can have a greater impact in the world. These in-person events are life transforming, and you can now get your early bird ticket with the code LUCKY24 and save $400 for a limited time. I look forward to seeing you there. Just listen to what some of the participants have to say about it.
I took the weekend workshop, and this workshop was really a big help to what kind of things I have to look for. For example, my relationship to money. So what kind of relationship I want to have to money. So this opened my eyes for a new way of looking at money, how you value yourself. So this is a really important part. If you are in a transition and you want to get some input, what are my next goals, what I want to go for, that's it.
So we're back and we're talking about the difference. So here you are, first child, you do IVF, the dream has come true, you've had your child and then boom, surprise kid. What's the difference mindset, with that? Like, why do you think that happened and it didn't happen on the first time? Have you ever analyzed that or have thoughts to
I
yourself?
think honestly, my thoughts are that it's not that we weren't trying, but we were not trying very hard. So the stress wasn't there. We were, it was just like, eh. In fact, for a while, we called him our anger child because like it was the one time in the month that we had to, try to conceive. And we were just pissed off at each other and we're like, oh, whatever. And the aunt somehow got this kid. And I think it's just, I don't know, I think there's a big part of our process is our bodies, right? So I was really lucky with IVF. I think it worked honestly because I was so lucky to live exactly where I did at that exact moment. So in Cambridgeshire in the UK, you got 3 rounds of free IVF, right? Like that does not exist anymore even there. And in the next county over, 15 minutes up the road, I would not have gotten it, right? So I didn't have the financial stress that comes for so many with it. And I was thinking, okay, if the first round doesn't work, we go over to the next one, and we're so my anxiety and stress about it was reduced significantly from what most people have. And I think after the first one, because that was such a lovely journey and I just wanted her to have a sibling, the stress wasn't there. And that's what helped, honestly. That's just a theory. I can't scientifically back that.
Yeah,
But
obviously you're connecting with yourself, but so you wanted a second child. That was clear for you, or you're like,
we
if it
did want a
happens,
second
great.
child.
Okay,
We kind of like, there was a little glimmer of a hope there, but we were also okay if that didn't happen. It was kind of one of those, yeah,
got you. Like you
yeah,
kind of surrendered is what I'm hearing in
yeah,
this, of like, okay, well, we're just, we
see what
already got
happens.
what we wanted.
Yeah.
If another one comes, great, but we're not going to go through IVF again or do other
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing your story because I think this might help many listeners that are on this journey or have been there in some way, shape, or form, just to kind of self-reflect. So, Mel, this has been fantastic of just hearing your story, hearing your perspectives on life. Where can people find you and connect with you?
Yeah. So one of the easiest ways to really get to know me is to listen to my podcast, which is Permission to Be Human, the podcast. And you can just find that on permissiontobehuman.ca and then find the little link for podcast on there because that's how you get to know someone, right? And all the other little links are on there for social media and such, but that's the best place to get to know me and listen and the people I have on to listen to. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mel. And make sure to come and listen to our mentorship private podcast so you can hear more about Mel and connect with her too and listen to her podcast, see what other golden nuggets you might get out of there. So as we wrap up, I always like asking our guests, what is one way that people can live life with more courage?
The thing that comes to mind is ask for help. It's one of the most courageous acts you can do, but ask for help. Let people help. It is a gift to them to help. They feel good about themselves. They feel they have purpose. So let them.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Mel, for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Hi there. I have something really cool for you. I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. You can check out all the details in the show notes, and all you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course.